Good morning, and welcome to this meeting of the Environmental Protection Commission of Hillsborough County for November 18. At this time, I'll ask our chaplain, Commissioner Stacy White, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll ask that everyone please stand, and we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Attention, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Heavenly Father, we thank you for all of those things that allows us to have a clean, safe, and comfortable environment. And I pray that you will guide this board, our staff, and stakeholders as we make important policy decisions this morning to keep those things in place. And as always, I pray for and give thanks to our first responders and members of our armed forces. Pray that you will guide them and keep them safe each and every day. I ask for these blessings and give these thanks in this time of Thanksgiving. In your heavenly name, amen.
Amen. Because this is a hybrid meeting, I think we'll need to take the roll.
Chair Smith?
Here.
Kim? Hagan?
Here.
Myers?
Here.
Cohen?
Here.
Overman?
Here.
Smith? I'm sorry, White?
Here.
Thank you. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Doherty. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
No, Commissioner, we do not.
And does anyone have any consent items that they'd like removed for question or comment? Seeing none, we'll move to public comment. Now, I know we have a couple of speakers signed up for our public hearing that comes a little bit later in the agenda. So I'll ask those speakers to just hold on till we reach that item in the agenda. Is there anyone else that has checked in to speak on any other items?
No one else has signed up.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. That takes us to approval of the consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
Got a motion to approve by Commissioner Cohen, second by Commissioner White. Let's take a roll call vote.
Chair Smith?
Yes.
Hagan?
Yes.
Myers?
Yes.
Cohen?
Yes.
Overman?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carried 6-0.
Thank you. And now we'll have our public hearing. So at this time, we will open the public hearing to consider a variance request submitted by Riverside Golf Course Community, L.L.C. And Mr. Marati, will you please explain the process?
Thank you, and good morning, Commissioners. Yes, this is a variance hearing that we haven't done since about 2014, so I'm going to walk you a little bit through the process before the applicant's counsel and their client present, and then our staff will also present, and I'll follow up with a recommendation, and then we'll move on to public comment and discussion and a vote. But big picture, we have a rule called Chapter 1-2. It's our overall kind of administrative procedures rule, and within that, you're allowed, any citizen's allowed to ask for a variance from the rules that this commission has passed. And so the general process is that a person applies for a variance, just a narrative document asking for a variance. They have to notice it in a paper of general circulation that there's going to be a public hearing. We conduct the public hearing, and then the commission can vote to deny, amend, or approve the variance request. So that's just the big picture, the process of how to get here. But what does an applicant have to demonstrate? And again, I'm speaking generalities about the process, not the specific case yet. But they have to demonstrate a substantial hardship exists, and that is defined in our rule to mean a substantial hardship that is typically of technological, legal, or economic. Or there's a violation of the principles of fairness, meaning is this rule, as it's applied to this one person, unfair in that similarly situated persons are treated differently, because sometimes we pass rules and they can be cookie cutter and they don't they don't always account for unique circumstances. So we try to see, is it applied fairly to the two people situated in the same situation? They have to make sure it's not a rule that's, its genesis is originally from the state, because we can't amend state rules, we can only amend our own rules, and that's not the case here. So it's a purely an EPC rule we're talking about. They have to justify why they need the variance with specific facts. They have to ask what they want. Usually it's a variance or a waiver, in this case a variance. And then also also very importantly, they have to also explain how they're still going to attempt to meet and try to meet the underlying intent of the rule. This is a noise variance, so how are they still going to try to meet our noise levels and our noise criteria? And so and I apologize, Mr. Sanford was going to pull up some slides, so that it'll be helpful on this next one here, just to show our sound level limits. So Mr. Sanford, if you can pull up our slides.
I think it may be Mr. Brewer.
Or I think Reggie's
going to do it,
He was
okay.
going to pull it up.
I have the slides. I had a problem showing. Okay.
Yeah, and we're on slide number 4. There we go. Thank you, Mr. Sanford. I appreciate it. So this specific exemption is exemption request referencing 1-1004 of the EPC rules, part of our noise rules. But it's important to look at 1-10.03, which is the actual decibel standards, the decibel on the A scale standards. We have a nighttime standard. We refer to it as a nighttime standard, 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., and we have a daytime standard, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. And so we created a standard, but we also have exemptions. And as you're very familiar with some of those exemptions, religious noise exemptions, school activity exemptions. But the one in this case is a landscaping by commercial operators exemption. So there's certain exemptions where you don't have to meet that criteria. And so if you look at sub 4 of 1-10.04, it's an exemption that we have in our rule for commercial operation of landscape equipment from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. They don't have to meet our noise decibel standards from that 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Time frame. This specific request is asking to extend that not 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., but 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. So don't be regulated by the EPC from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. So that's what the specific request, the variance request is here. And then I'll just, if you move to the next slide, just get you located. Where this golf course community is in Ruskin, Florida, and it's really wedged between US 41 to the west and Highway 75 to the east, and just adjacent to and south of the Little Manatee River, just to get you a little location. And so with that, Commissioners, that's just kind of the background procedural. I was going to ask Mr. Sanford to drop our slides off, and then if you have any procedural questions, you could ask them now, but if you have fact-specific and technical questions, I would recommend you wait till after the applicant's counsel, Mr. Eric Bossart, presents, till after Reggie Sanford and I present our side of it, and the citizens present their side. So with that, if it's okay, we can move to Mr. Bossart's presentation. Have a 10-minute block for
Let's check
him.
and see if anybody has any procedural questions. And Commissioner White.
Madam Chair, my name's in the queue, but it is to speak when we get to general board member discussion.
Thank you for pointing that out, because I don't have that cue showing up. So y'all may have to raise your hands here in the boardroom.
You don't have one of these?
No, I don't have one of those. So y'all may have to raise your hands till I get one. All right. And with that, back to you, Mr. Marotti,
Yes.
to make the staff presentation.
Yeah, so as we previously discussed, the applicant would be given a 10-minute block to present their case. They may have 1 or 2 speakers within that block, and then Mr. Sanford and myself will present the EPC's perspective, and then we'll have the citizens talk and then open it for a discussion and a vote. So at this time, we pass it off to Mr. Bossart, attorney for the applicant.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Marotti, and good morning, everybody. My name is Eric Bossart, and this firm does represent Riverside Golf Course Community, L.L.C, in our request for a noise variance. And I would like to lead up. Thank the Commission for setting our variance request for hearing, and for everyone's attendance here this morning. We certainly do appreciate that. And by way of a brief background, we did request a variance due to one of our residents inside the community complaining about the practice putting green being cut before 7 a.m. and their home is so situated upon.
Excuse me for interrupting you, but could you speak a little bit louder or turn up your volume a little bit? We can hear you, but it's a little bit more difficult than I think it needs to be.
Yes, let me see if I can.
I'm not sure I understand.
My watch can't even hear you.
Okay, is that a little bit better?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect, okay. And so by way of a brief background, we did request a variance due to one of our residents in the community complaining about the practice putting green being cut before 7 a.m. And while this one particular resident has not filed a formal complaint with the county, we wanted to make our request to try to get out in front of this matter so we can continue to not only operate within the local rules and the rules of the EPC, but also run our business in a reasonable and effective manner. Running a golf course and maintaining a golf course, as my guest, Mr. Jonathan Lee, who is in charge of the operations at the course, will also attest, requires constant maintenance, mowing on a daily basis, oftentimes mowing in the early hours of the morning. It is common industry standard to cut grass on golf courses as early as 5 a.m. in order to accommodate early and oftentimes more expensive tee time reservations. As we all know, living in Florida, it tends to get hot well before noon, and so oftentimes there's a large contingent of golfers that like to get in and out with the idea that they could possibly be done with their round by noon. And golfers pay a premium for those tee times. However, if we cannot mow our practice green before 7 a.m. in order to accommodate those golfers who want to practice before their round, then we are not providing our customers with accommodations that are minimum standards in the industry, in the golf course industry. And as the course superintendent will confirm, this course needs to begin being cut beginning at 5 a.m. in order to have the course golfer ready, let's say, by 7 a.m., which is the first, which is the commencement of the first tee time. And again, this is common industry standard for most golf courses, not only throughout Florida, but throughout the country as well. And by not being able to use lawn equipment until 7 a.m., the course will not be able to accommodate golfers until roughly 9 a.m. If we want to get into how this substantially impacts our operation and our earning potential, there are roughly 14 tee times on a daily basis between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. And on those 14 tee times, 4 golfers are set to go out per each tee time, which is essentially 56 golfers that we would not be able to accommodate. We charge each golfer $37, and that roughly comes out to $2,072 per day that we are losing in earning potential if we were to not be able to get our golf course ready for golfers by 9 a.m. That roughly equals about $14,500 per week, and it is our position to the Board of County Commissioners this morning that that does fulfill the substantial impact on our operations. There is unfortunately no other reasonable part of the day that the course can commence mowing operations. Mowing at night poses substantial risk of injury, seeing how we're not able to see where we are going, mowing over bunkers and whatnot, that always runs a risk. And especially in daylight savings time, that provides us with even less of an opportunity to mow and conduct maintenance on the course. Rules 1 TAC 10.03 and 1 TAC 10.04 impact us in a disparate manner, unlike a restaurant or other commercial business. Our business as a golf course is grass maintenance. The grass needs to be cut to a certain length. If the ball doesn't roll, the golfers are going to know about it. They're no longer going to come out to our course. That is what we are judged on. And if we cannot meet those industry standards and we cannot get a tee time going until 9 a.m. at the earliest, then golfers will go elsewhere, thereby crippling our earning potential as a business. And pursuant to the variance process, we did submit the request for the variance, citing how we would incur a substantial hardship and how the purpose of the underlying rule has been achieved by other means. Getting into that, I do have Mr. Jonathan Lee here, and I believe now will be an appropriate time for him to take up a little bit of my 10 minutes and discuss exactly what type of equipment is being used during the non-exempt hours, and how we can still satisfy the underlying intent of. And Jonathan, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Perfect. And thank you for being here this morning. And briefly, definitely, you don't need to be too long-winded here, but if you could briefly explain to the Board of County Commissioners what equipment is used and why it is important for to start operations at 5 a.m. so we can have the golf course ready by 7 a.m.
Yeah. So we conduct our mowing and use our most quiet equipment, the triplex, in the morning. We refrain from using any two-stroke engines, the blowers, until roughly about 8:30 to try and give the residents as much peace and quiet as possible. But the greens mowing unit is quiet, but we do need to operate that before 7 a.m. There's no way to do it any later, because by the time you come around to doing that at 9 o'clock, there's too many people around the golf green. It's impractical to be able to clear 20 golf carts and 40 people out of the way to be able to conduct that. If you don't have the putting green mowed in the morning, it's covered in worm cast, dirt, debris. Is not a good product. If you can't mow the rest of the greens in the morning, then, as you said, golfers are going to go elsewhere, and it's going to be a severe financial hardship to the operations here.
Thank you. And again, and my apologies if you did touch on this at the beginning, but what types of devices or means are being used before 7 a.m. in order to make sure that as little noise is being produced as possible?
Yeah, so the only vehicle we use in the morning is the triplex mower before 7 a.m. The fairway units, the rough mowing units, everything else does not go out until after that time. So it's just one unit.
Okay, and I suppose this would be my last question. Do we also begin or commence operations starting as far away from the residences as possible, and then eventually?
That is correct. Yeah, we have 5 golf holes that do not have any homes around it, and those are the holes that we begin on, and then we work our way back, starting from the clubhouse out, to allow for the play to go as early as practical.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you, Mr. Lee. I certainly appreciate that. And so it is our position that the underlying rule can still be achieved by other means, by way of limiting the use of two-stroke engine equipment until the exempt hours, as well as conducting maintenance in the morning hours, starting as far away from any other of the Riverside's residences. And so it is our position that we do qualify for a noise variance pursuant to Rule 1 TAC 2.50 to expand our use of commercial landscaping equipment to 2 hours earlier, to have exempt hours beginning at 5 a.m. instead of 7 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you. And I noticed that Mr. Jonathan Lee spoke as part of the applicant team, so not as public comment in that part of the meeting. This takes us to the presentation by EPC staff.
Yes, Commissioner, thank you. So at this point, the Air Director, Reggie Sanford, will present, and then I'll follow up with a recommendation.
Thank you.
Mr. Sanford, I believe you're muted. I'm going to unmute you right now. I just unmuted you. Can you hear?
Okay, great. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Good morning. Good morning, Commissioners. Reggie Sanford, Air Division. Before I get into the meat of my presentation, I just want to go over some quick noise basics. The unit of measurement that we use to measure noise is called a decibel, and the A scale is used most of the time when we go out to do measurement, because it I guess it best replicates human hearing. To give you an idea of I guess the attenuation or the increases in noise that we look at, if you have an increase of 3 decibels in sound, it's barely noticeable to the human ear. whereas if you have an increase of 10 decibels in sound, it's perceived as doubling the sound. So I've added this example of loudness to give you an idea of relative noise levels. This is a loudness chart. As you can see, a rock band may emit 110 decibels, whereas a dishwasher may be closer to 50. Using this same general information chart, we see that a lawnmower at 100 feet away may emit 75 decibels. So if the variance were granted, these levels could be expected at 5 a.m. To some of the residents at the affected property. But whereas a typical bedroom levels would be closer to 30 decibels, that's pretty much the general expectation that people have when they sleep. They want, quieter noises, quieter levels, and it's our contention that lawn maintenance would definitely go against that. Specifically, here is what we're talking about. The Riverside community has approximately 257 homes through our GIS count. These homes could be affected by the previously mentioned noise levels, up to 70 decibels if they're 100 feet away. And approval of the variance could lead to 5 a.m. maintenance on all the green spaces that you see here. So the variance wouldn't be restricted to not necessarily just one area. It would, allow them the ability to mow their green spaces like you see here on this map. We did a little survey of the golf courses in Hillsborough County. By our count, there are approximately 45 other golfing communities across the county. All of these golfing communities are subject to the same EPC rules, none of which has asked for relief in the way that Riverside is requesting from the noise rule. We estimate there are at least 29,000 housing units contained within these courses. So if you just take that out farther, you're talking about tens of thousands of people that potentially could be impacted if they all were to ask for a variance request as it's Riverside. It's our belief that approval of the Riverside variance will set the stage for additional requests and add to the overall impact of noise on our community. The applicant contends the rule is unfair and places them at a disadvantage. We took a sample survey of tee times of several golf courses across the county. It looks like there are about 20 of them that we did the sample. As you can see, most tee times commence at 7 a.m., which is no different than Riverside. And of course, all are subject to the same rule. So, in this respect, we don't see where there is any type of general unfairness or any type of disadvantage. The courses find ways to cut the lawns and still, maintain a certain amount of repose for the residents. Our staff also considered the lawn care rule provisions of Chapter 1-10 and, compared our rule to similar municipalities. As you can see, EPC rule lines up well with other cities. In fact, the majority of the cities listed there, they have prohibitions against lawn maintenance outside of the hours shown on the chart. So really, in effect, their rule is more stringent than EPC's. The way our rule is, it doesn't prohibit, lawn care at other hours. It just says that, the lawn maintenance has to stay within the standards set forth in Chapter 1-10, the noise rule. So to, to summarize our staff comments, we have no reason to believe Riverside is unduly impacted. All golf courses must comply with the same EPC rules. The information that we received when we request additional information, I'm sorry, somehow my slide moved, but the information that we received when we requested additional information to the various requests did not extend as far as what Riverside presented today. The information that we received at the time, we perceived as being somewhat vague. Some of what they presented today included economic information, and they also talked about detailing a little bit how the equipment they plan to use is quieter, but nevertheless, they didn't provide any actual technical decibel readings that demonstrated that their equipment would be quieter than a regular lawnmower. So, based on what we received when we requested additional information, we thought the information was somewhat vague. And as we stated in our previous slide, your approval of this request would open the door for many other requests that could adversely affect many citizens. If you were to total the residents that live in these 29,000 golfing communities, it could be as many as 100,000 people that, potentially, I'm not saying would, but potentially could be affected if they all were to ask for a similar variance. And then lastly, if approved, we believe your offices would be inundated with complaints from citizens seeking remedies on how to address the noise levels from this very early morning lawn maintenance. So, Mr. Marotti, I'll turn it back over to you.
And I'll just add to his comments before I get to the staff recommendation. There's talk about how it's the applicants have mentioned that it might be dangerous mowing at night, but 5 a.m. is equally as dark as 7, 8 p.m. And so I don't think there's a difference between saying the darkness danger of 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. I don't think that argument carries weight. And some of these machines can have lights, and so whether they mow then or later, I don't think that darkness should be an issue or a factor to consider. And again, they try to make the point that they're being treated different, but they compare themselves to other commercial operations like restaurants or other commercial properties. We really should be looking at golf course to golf course, and that's exactly what Mr. Sanford did. There's many golf courses that have a 7 a.m. tee time. So the rule says you look at similarly situated persons. Are we treating this person differently than other ones? We're not treating this golf course different than any other golf course. So I just think it was important to mention that. And as Mr. Sanford said, they mentioned that the triplex machine that they would use for the greens is quieter, but they didn't back it up with any studies, any explanation of what is quiet to them may not be quiet to the citizens that live right next to it. So we wanted that study, and nothing was provided to explain how it would be quieter. So I just wanted to back up Mr. Sanford's comments with those. And so finally, if we could see that recommendation slide, Mr. Sanford. The EPC staff recommendation is to deny the variance request for failure to show a substantial hardship, failure to show any violation of the principles of fairness, and failure to show how they try to meet the underlying intent of the rule by still trying to meet the noise regulation in general, and also then authorize the chair to execute a final order memorializing whatever vote this commission takes. So at this point, commissioners, we should move to the public comment and then discussion, questions, and a vote.
Thank you. And as I said, Mr. Lee had signed up for public comment, but that is satisfied by his having already testified with the applicant, correct?
Correct. I mean, if I don't want to deny them
Right.
any other opportunity if Mr. Lee has something else to say, but it does satify that.
Should
Yes.
we ask?
It might be safe, just to be
Okay.
safe. Yeah.
Mr. Lee, you're signed up first to speak. Did you have anything else to add within a brief moment?
No, you're good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then that takes us to our next public comment. Ms. Donna Jones, is she available to speak?
Yes, I'm here.
Good morning,
Yes.
Ms. Jones. I believe you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. My name is Donna Jones. I live at the Riverside Club. I'm speaking on behalf of some of the residents here who have a concern that if the variance were allowed to move to 5 a.m., that would create some more hardship on our residents who live right on the golf course. The equipment is already on the golf course doing their job prior to that, and the fact that we've only had one resident complain, I think, just says that we all know that when we move to a golf course, we have to expect some inconvenience. I believe if the variance is moved to 5 a.m., we could possibly see a possibility of seeing the equipment out prior to that, which I believe I would agree with the gentleman who said that you would receive many more complaints. I have some issues that have already been covered. It's as dark at 5 a.m. as it is at 10 p.m., so the safety and hazard of that would be the same. Again, I guess my only comment would be, since we have only had one complaint and the equipment is out there prior to 7 o'clock now, I would ask that you leave the variance as it is. Thank you.
Other public comment that signed up, I'm not aware of.
That's everyone, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Mr. Marati, anything else before we open for board discussion?
Nope, that'd be the appropriate time then.
Okay, and Commissioner White, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I couldn't agree with our staff more on this issue. The neighbors that are complaining for good reason. When that rule was set, we set the earliest possible time for the applicable decibel level to be at 7 a.m. because those hours before 7 a.m. are early, and a lot of people are still trying to sleep at those hours. It's clear that other golf courses throughout the county are not experiencing the same issues. They're managing to keep their greens mowed and cared for within the allotted time. So for those reasons, I'm going to move that we adopt the EPC staff recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. And Commissioner Overman, you're recognized.
Thank you. And I think one of the issues that we do need to address is that, yes, individuals choose to buy a home close to a golf course. I chose to buy a home close to a middle school near a highway. And so when I can't control how many people decide to get up early and go to work in the morning, that road traffic that was on Reggie's slide was a good indicator of why there's certain days I'm annoyed by the sounds, because it's outside of the realm of which I have any control, but I recognize the choice I made. Citizens that move to a golf course do know that the lawns need to be mowed, but they also know that that we've had these rules in place in order to protect their right to quiet, between the hours other than 7 a.m. And so changing the rule for those individuals that have made the choice to deal with lawnmower noise on a golf course is not unfair and is undue hardship to those that have made that choice, in my opinion. So I would support leaving the rule as it stands. I do have lawnmowers that show up at 7 a.m. at the school next door with blowers, and it is annoying, but I've made the choice, and I knew that that was what the rule was. If I made the choice that I would be willing to accept 7 a.m. and it changed to 5, I would have a serious problem with it. And to staff's recommendation, our phones would ring off the hook. The other issue is that while the applicant has indicated that they have machinery that has a lower level of sound, as we heard, there was no evidence to that effect. And if we were to change the rule, we have no assurances that that would be the requirement for that type of equipment that might meet their argument. And I'm less likely to assume that any landscaping service that would show up for a contract would know all of those rules. So I agree that it would be wise to stay on course and make no changes at this time.
Thank you. Commissioner Cohen, you're recognized.
I agree completely with Commissioners White and Overman.
Yes, I couldn't agree more either. So seeing no further board discussion, I think we're ready to take a roll call vote on the motion by Commissioner White, seconded by Commissioners Overman and Cohen.
Chair Smith?
Yes.
Kemp?
Yes.
Yes.
Hagan?
Yes.
Myers?
Yes.
Cohen?
Yes.
Overman?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carried 7-0.
Thank you. Does that conclude our public hearing?
Yes, thank you, Commissioners. Yeah, that would conclude our public hearing.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for the public comment that came to help us with that decision this morning. So now we move to the regular agenda. And first up, we have a report on the gypsum stacks in the adjacent counties that this board has asked for. And I just want to introduce it by saying I very much appreciate the EPC staff being willing to research and inform us about these mining operations outside our county, even though they're well outside your purview. This is our Environmental Protection Commission, and it's really our chance to learn together and speak together in the sunshine about environmental issues that, even if they're outside our county, may impact some of our natural resources and quality of life in our county. So we do need to have a regional picture sometimes about these issues, and I very much appreciate y'all going kind of above and beyond the call of your Hillsborough County duty to help us understand the big picture of gypsum stacks and help the public understand as well. It's an issue that's been kind of top of mind ever since Piney Point. So thank you. With that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Ms. Doherty, you can introduce Paula.
Thank you, Commissioners. This is one in a few series. We have one left that we'll deal with it in 2022, which is mining and reclamation activities. This is a deeper dive. This is very comprehensive, and Commissioner, I couldn't agree more that it's good for the public to know this. I actually learned some things about these facilities, and yes, they are on our borders, and they do reside by our tributaries, our watersheds. So it's important to know what facilities are open, what facilities are closed, and what the closure plans are for the facilities that are open. So with that, I'm going to introduce Paula Noblett. She will be giving the presentation. And after that, we do have Sam O'Robbie and Ed Kopic and other water staff available for questions with Paula, but I'm sure Paula will be able to answer most of your questions. So Paula?
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Paula Noblett with the EPC Water Division. Let me take just a moment to share my video. Okay, can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Okay, Commissioners, you requested in September meeting that we bring back information on the location of gypsum stacks in adjacent counties and a briefing on which may have the potential to impact Hillsborough County. So this presentation is all about gypsum stacks that are outside Hillsborough in the counties that are on our borders. We will show you gypsum stack locations, the status of their operations, which have discharges ultimately to the Hillsborough County watershed, and then take a deeper look into those stacks that are closest to our county line and describe some of the recent incidents. But all of the facilities that I will be presenting on are located outside of Hillsborough, and they aren't under EPC jurisdictional rules. We don't perform inspections outside of our county, and therefore we don't have firsthand knowledge of them, but they are regulated by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. The information that we gathered for the presentation was based on DEP records, and we interviewed DEP and Mosaic personnel. So this is a broad map showing the location of the gypsum stacks that are in adjacent counties. And the county line is this big black square here. And for reference, the Riverview facilities are here in the middle. And these are our Plant City stacks up to the north. And there's a lot of gypsum stacks shown in red here. There's 18 in adjacent counties. There are no stacks to the north in Pasco County, and only one to our south, Piney Point down here in Manatee County. Most, as you can see, are located to our east in Polk County because the geology of Central Florida makes that area rich for phosphate mining and co-location of the gypsum stacks. Okay, this slide focuses on the operation of the operational status of the stacks in Polk County. The active stacks are depicted in green, inactive or yellow, and closed or red. Only 2 stacks are currently active, the Mosaic Bartow facility and Mosaic New Wales South stack. By active, we mean that they're still processing phosphate rock for acid and fertilizer production and generating phosphogypsum as a byproduct. The inactive stacks are those stacks that have not received gypsum in over a year, and the owner does not intend to dispose of more gypsum there. The stacks can't sit in a prolonged inactive state, though. They have to address closure. And state DEP rules require that they submit a closure plan and a permit application at least 90 days before deactivation. And if their deactivation is just temporary, they're just sitting idle, they still have to get approval each year from DEP for that temporary deactivation. There are currently 4 inactive stacks, but this one here, Mosaic Green Bay, it's in the process of being reactivated to receive gypsum from Mosaic Bartow up here. But all the other stacks you see in yellow are working toward closure. The closed stacks are the ones in red, and those are the ones that have completed closure in accordance with state rules at the time and facility closure plans. Now, the goal for closure of these facilities, per the rule, is to pose no significant threat to human health or the environment. The rule requires leachate collection systems, minimizing contaminated runoff from the stack by installing final cover, treating or removing processed water from the ponds and drainage conveyances, and removal of pond sludge. It also includes the requirement to provide financial assurance to DEP. There are 11 closed stacks in Polk County, and these stacks have permits from DEP governing closure, long-term care, and monitoring of groundwater and surface water discharges. And because of the closure requirements, they generally present reduced risk. And this slide shows the watersheds of the permitted stack systems in Polk County. All the gyp stacks in purple are discharging into the Peace River watershed, and those don't come into Hillsborough County. The gyp stacks in orange have outfalls to either the north or the south prong of the Alafia, which does come into Hillsborough County. So with the exception of these operated by U.S. Agriculture, U.S. Agrichemical, and this northern stack here by Mosaic, all the others are coming into Hillsborough County. And this is showing the status of the operations of the stacks that come into Hillsborough County. So the closed stacks again are in red, and their permitted discharges are associated with stormwater and sometimes also treated processed water from stack seepage. The inactive stacks are in yellow. They are in various stages of closure. They discharge stormwater and some discharge treated processed water to facilitate closure. Mosaic Green Bay, as I mentioned before, is being reactivated to receive gypsum from Mosaic Bartow. The facility includes a regional processed water holding pond and treatment system. Green Bay outfall is permitted to discharge stormwater and also treated processed water from Green Bay and other Mosaic facilities to the headwaters of the North Prong. And they routinely discharge reverse osmosis treated processed water and some stormwater from the closed portions of the stack in common areas.
Ms. Noblett, excuse me, but if I could ask you to just be careful to maintain your speech at a higher volume so that we can understand. It seems to be kind of drifting high and low. Thank you.
Static. Some static.
And Paula, I'd like to, just for edification, say the North Prong is the North Prong of the Alafia River that flows into this county.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I'm getting some static here. I don't know why, but hopefully it'll go away. There again. Generally, Mosaic tries to route their processed water from inactive stacks to active plants for reuse if possible. So most of the water being discharged by the inactive stacks is stormwater. The active stacks are shown in green. The 2 active stacks that discharge to Hillsborough's watershed are the Mosaic Bartow South Stack, located here below Highway 60, and the Mosaic New Wales South Stack. Mosaic Bartow has 2 outfalls, with one connected to our watershed via Skin Sapling Creek, and this enters the north prong of the Alafia. This outfall is permitted to discharge stormwater and non-contact processed water like cooling tower blowdown, pump seal water, steam traps, and sampling coolers. There are no permitted discharges of treated contact processed water to Hillsborough County from this stack system. And we'll go into more detail on the other active stack, Mosaic New Wales, in the next slide since it's close to our border. But while we're on this slide, I would like to point out that although there are many stack systems with permitted outfalls leading to our watershed, The stacks located east of Highway 37, which is this line here, they're over 20 miles away, and that's if the discharge were to flow in a straight path to Hillsborough County. The majority of the discharges from these facilities is also just stormwater. So under normal conditions, there's a lot of dilution and limited potential to impact Hillsborough's waterways. Also, regardless of whether the stacks are active, inactive, or closed, all the outfalls are highly regulated by DEP permits, which include routine monitoring and reporting requirements, as noted in our board meeting. And for this presentation, we reviewed the outfall data submitted to DEP for the last several years, and the effluent quality appears to be in substantial compliance with the DEP permits. Okay, going to our closest stack, Mosaic New Wales. This is an aerial looking southeast. So there are two stacks. One is the north stack, which is here on the left side of the photo. And this one is nicely grassed and closed, and it also has a holding pond on top, and the pond is lined. And then there's this pond that's in between the north and south stacks. And this area here that looks kind of sandy is the south stack, and that is the active stack. And this is an aerial showing the north and south stacks at New Wales. The south stack is lined, and it includes 32 monitoring wells. Portions of the plant aren't lined, but those include slurry walls to prevent any kind of migration of pollutants. The DEP permit allows for receipt of water from their Green Bay plant, Plant City, and the Nichols facility. Most of the processed water is reused here at New Wales. However, the permit also allows discharges of treated processed water, contaminated non-processed wastewater, which includes excess groundwater from production wells and recovery wells, and stormwater through the pathway shown in blue all the way to this outfall down here, which is at the south prong of the Alafaya. And data submitted to DEP over the last several years looks like it is in compliance with the DEP permit. Now the north stack is closed. It was constructed in 1975, and it stopped receiving gypsum in 2000. It has two lined processed water holding ponds on top. And this stack includes a slurry wall and recovery wells to prevent migration of pollutants. There are 12 monitoring wells to check the effectiveness of the control system, and stormwater from the closed stack is sent to the New Wales clay settling area. This stack's been closed a long time, and it really poses little risk. The other nearby stack in Polk County is Mosaic Nichols. This stack is outlined in red, and it shut down 22 years ago in December of 1999. The stack was closed under state rules in 2011, and it is covered and grassed. Long-term care and maintenance under the DEP permit includes a perimeter containment system, including slurry walls, relief wells, and a drain system for seepage. And it also has an annual performance monitoring inspection. There are 14 monitor wells and 62 piezometers to evaluate the containment system. Seepage water is collected in a lined sump, and it goes to New Wales for reuse. There are two outfalls that discharge stormwater into 30 Mile Creek, which is a tributary to the North Prong. One of the outfalls can also discharge treated processed water, but this is unusual and is only a backup to the normal routing to New Wales. Both outfalls have routine discharges of just stormwater in the rainy season. And there are no processed water ponds on the site that are full of processed water. The stack's been closed 22 years, and it has minimal potential impact to Hillsborough County. And this is the only facility in Manatee County, Piney Point, which you all are familiar with to some extent. It's owned and operated by HRK. The stack was closed in 2010 per state rule. There are 3 lined compartments atop the stack, and it holds port dredge material and the associated seawater, which brought the dredge material up there. And a fourth compartment also contains processed water from gypsum seepage. A DEP administrative agreement addresses long-term care and monitoring of the stack. It includes groundwater monitoring wells and authorizes the discharges of stormwater from closed areas to the bay. Processed water was managed by enhanced evaporation and permitted discharge of treated water to Manatee County utilities. In March 2021, there was a release of processed water mixed with seawater. We gave an April presentation to the board regarding the incident, but just to refresh and provide an update. In March 26, site staff reported a leak on the east side of the gyp stack. They reported that this created a risk of failure. So on March 29th, DEP issued an emergency final order to allow controlled release of the wastewater. Then the governor declared a state of emergency for Manatee, Hillsborough, and Pinellas counties. From March 30th to April 9th, 215 million gallons of water not meeting standards was released to Port Manatee. And it was released as shown by this red line here into the bay.
Ms. Noblett, you are kind of again getting away from the microphone, I think. If you could be sure you're still speaking loudly enough and close enough to the microphone so we can hear. Thank you.
Here she goes. You can continue, Paula.
Okay.
Just try and get closer to the microphone.
I am on top of it. It's
Okay.
I've plugged this going on regardless of whether I'm speaking or not. I'm not sure if that's the problem or what, but
Okay.
you have IT helping me right now, so if you'll bear with me a few moments.
Okay.
Yeah.
While Paula's getting situated, I did want to, for members of the public, tell them what a piezometer was. Because it's important. There was a sinkhole at New Wales. Commissioner White probably remembers that quite well. It borders his district. But it's an instrument for measuring the pressure of liquid and gas, or something related to pressure such as compressibility of liquid. Piezometers are often placed in boreholes to monitor the pressure or depth of groundwater. And so there were 62 of them in the slide before for that one stack. So for members of the public, I just wanted to give that definition. So with that, Paula, hopefully you've got your issues resolved. If you want to continue, please.
Trying to just continue.
Yeah, just
Okay.
go.
Let's see here, where am I going? There we go. Oh, shoot. Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, okay. All right. From March 30th to April 9th, 215 million gallons of water not meeting standards was released to Port Manatee. Since then, repairs were made to the liner and the stack is stable. There have been no further discharges except for stormwater. Innovative technology to reduce nutrients in the stored water has been used since April of 2021. Piping of some of the water to the Manatee North Regional Water Reclamation Facility and spray evaporation still continues. This last August, a receiver was appointed to serve as an independent third party to oversee management and closure. And in September, DEP issued a notice of draft permit to Manatee County for the underground injection well. A public meeting was held on October 6th, and DEP is still looking at the comments that were received from that meeting. We spoke with DEP regarding this facility, and they say their overall direction is to ensure that processed water inventory is reduced, and that would minimize the threat to the environment. Okay, other recent incidents, they all occurred in August of 2021 for some reason. It looks like August was a bad month. But Mosaic reported to DEP the collapse of a tank at New Wales, and this resulted in a release of 25,000 gallons of acid, which went to the facility grounds. It stayed within the confines of the facility. Much of the spilled material was recovered, and the portion that was not was neutralized, and the sodas cleaned up with the assistance from a third party under DEP's direction. And they're still looking at the cause of the tank collapse, so there isn't a final report on that just yet. Also in August, Mosaic reported to DEP a liner tear at the Bartow facility. The tear was located in the processed water pond located on the side slope near the base of the active stack. And since that time, they reported they isolated the area from the processed water system, and they're moving forward with repairs. So kind of in summary here, there are 4 inactive stacks in Polk County with permitted discharges to the Hillsborough watershed. They're a good distance from our county line, and their discharges are substantially in compliance with DEP permits. so they have limited potential to impact our waterways. There are currently 2 active stacks, and that's Bartow South and New Wales South. And Bartow is really far from us, and only the New Wales stack system is permitted for release of processed water. The New Wales facility discharges are stormwater mixed with some treated processed water, and they're substantially in compliance with the DEP permit. There's some risk associated with this facility due to its proximity, and this is really just if there was an abnormal event resulting in a release of untreated water to surface water. Because, however, even the 2016 sinkhole, it did not result in any impact to offsite wells. And generally, closed stacks present a reduced threat. There are 11 closed stacks that have permitted discharges that come into our watershed. There are 3 that are nearby: Mosaic Nichols, the New Wales North Stack, and Piney Point. They usually discharge stormwater only, not processed water, and they're in compliance with permit effluent conditions. However, I don't want to say that all closed stacks have a reduced risk, because the 215 million gallons that was released from Piney Point, it did have a significant impact on the bay. This was untreated processed wastewater. Approximately 260 million gallons of remnant processed water is still held in that same compartment that suffered the event back in March of this last year. And the risk is being reduced, though, through close oversight by DEP, enhanced treatment technology, and piping to the Manatee Reclamation Facility. But the quicker the wastewater inventory can be reduced, the better. And Commissioners, the stack systems, they are a source of pollution, and therefore they are highly regulated by the state. There's a lot of sampling, frequent inspections by facility staff and DEP personnel, and third parties come in. This is to be proactive and identify concerns before any kind of events occur. There's also strict reporting requirements on any abnormal condition that's discovered. And these reports of releases are also publicly available now via the DEP website, so there's an elevated awareness by the public. But despite the regulations, monitoring, and engineering controls, there are still pollution events. What's important is that these events are responded to appropriately. We learn from them and put measures in place to address identified issues and evaluate the use of current technology where we can. And this concludes my presentation. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for that very comprehensive presentation. I very much appreciate that. I know we all do. Commissioner Overman, you're recognized.
Thank you. I have just a couple of questions about the Piney Point injection process. I've always had a long time concern about, pushing things underground that we can't see where it goes, but also, at the risk to our water tables and the fact that we live on a Swiss cheese of limestone throughout the whole state. So I was curious in the process of coming up with that solution, what were the hazards either disclosed or accepted in making the decision to use that technology to address the treated water?
Go ahead, Paul. I was going to let you or Sam answer that question.
Really, the EPC was not involved in that decision. That's a DEP permit. We just were, actually, we got the copy of the permit. We're looking with the DEP records. So we're not a party to it, so I'm sorry that I don't have a lot of information on that. We can bring that information back and try to provide that to you all at a later date.
Commissioner, we'll research that and we'll brief the commissioners on that issue.
Thank you. And thank you for raising that issue. I know this is something that our citizens are asking about as well, how that, exactly how that injection well process works. Where are the wells? How deep do they go? What is the, is there any chance of the injected material getting into the aquifer or interfering with water tables and water pressure in any way? It'd be, I know there are a lot of members of the public interested in what they're doing so close to our borders there. The other question I had about Piney Point is on the slide about the mitigation efforts. It mentioned innovative treatment to reduce nutrients. And so I was just wondering kind of a little bit more detail about what is that?
Well, there's two different treatments that are going on. One is spraying the aerosoling the material, but it's not a large volume that's going on there. The other one is a proprietary water treatment process. But again, we do have information about that we can bring back to you. We do receive updates from Piney Point on a daily basis to talk about how they're handling the water and removing water. Obviously, we're in the dry season, but every time a drop of rain comes in contact with the water that's in the stack, you have more processed water, which could lead to another issue like we had in the spring. But we are coming back in January, I believe, with the mining and reclamation, but we'll be happy to brief all the commissioners on what's going on at Piney Point with those two other ways they're disposing of water. I also had heard at one point they were trucking some water out, and that's a common thing sometimes with the fertilizer industries to remove water balances, which is actually a very expensive way to take trucks of water and then put it into another stack that has capacity and enough freeboard to accept that material.
Thank you, because there's reducing the amount of polluted water in those ways of spraying and trucking or whatever, or injecting. But there's also, I mean, I'm just curious about the proprietary process for the innovative treatment of reducing nutrients, because, I mean, we have, it might apply to, it might have other applications if there's really some way to take polluted water, and I think I've been reading about this in the paper and other articles about ways to reduce the nutrients in the polluted water so it's not such a threat.
Correct. There's flocculants, again, but that can cause other issues, obviously, as that precipitates out of the water. There are microbes, and let me tell you, when Piney Point happened, I think there was a long line of vendors that wanted contracts there. Microbes can work in water and eat the nutrients as well as in the soil. So again, the spraying they were already doing. Some discharging to Manatee County was also occurring. But again, I'm not sure it's very significant. There were pilot projects, and so the amount of water that's being consumed that way. But removing nutrients is always a very important thing, but I'm not sure if that one is a flocculant or a microbe, but we'll get you the information.
Thanks. And Jen, just a last question about the Peace. You know, they were mentioning the impacts on the Peace River, and you were, thank you for noting that some of these potential, the location of some of these mines is on the south prong of the Alafaya River. And I know that aside from the devastating phosphate spills that I grew up with on the upper Alafaya that would just fill the river with dead fish and be horrid impacts, there's also impacts to the water level. I've been out on the Peace River where it's been reduced to a little trickle. You can no longer kayak that river as you used to be able to do. And I just wonder, are we suffering any of or prone to any of those impacts on our rivers, the Alafaya, the Little Manatee River, of just water level to that extent that it's happened on the Peace River?
Commissioner, the Peace River, I used to serve on the Water Management Governing Board, and we actually went to the Peace River when it was during a drought. Right now, it's rainy, and again, they have a lot of fissures and sinkholes right within the Peace River, and so the water just kind of pours down in there. But what you're talking about is very important. When the facilities were active, the Bartow facilities at the north prong of the L.L.C River, they discharged millions of gallons of treated water per day down there, which had a flushing effect. I'm not sure where they're at right now as far as those discharges, but obviously they're going to affect water levels in the river. And if you were thinking about it, we're in a high water table right now. You and I lived through the droughts back in the 2000s. And I lived on the L.L.C River when there was the big discharge from Mulberry that came down that river. So again, we'll gather all this information and brief commissioners, but that's a very good point. On the Little Manatee, I'm not sure how the Peace or the Horse Creek or Charlie Creek feed into that system, but I'm not really sure the levels there are being affected. But certainly the L.L.C would be something to look at.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions or comments from commissioners, I just want to say thank you very much for a thorough presentation and for being available and willing to do the research to answer our questions. I do see Commissioner Overman.
I do have one last question. Do we have an MOU with DEP to get notified if our surrounding counties have a compliance issue?
Commissioner, there's a state warning point that anyone can sign up for. I'm on it. I mean, wastewater discharges from all over the state are probably the #1 thing on there after a heavy rainfall. But yes, we are notified. We work very closely with Vish Swat. I can never say his last name. I think it's Swathe. He's with the FDP, been there for 31 years, 32 years, and we have a good working relationship. And I guarantee if something happened on the borders, Kelly Boatwright, who used to work for the FDP, is now the new director of the Southwest District. She would pick up the phone and call me immediately. So we have many different staff gets that state warning point, many staff within the agency, including myself, plus Tallahassee is in contact with us. We go out and do joint inspections locally, but I promise you, when Piney Point happened, Noah Valenstein called directly to me, and we met within 24 hours down on site. So they're very responsive.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we'll move to our next agenda item, which is an action item. And that will be Reggie Sanford. Ms. Doherty, you want to introduce that?
Yes, commissioners. Back in September, I believe it was, we were going through another Mosaic presentation. I think Commissioner Cohen was the one who noticed the old stack that had resided on Tampa Bay. And we talked about radiation and radon, and we came back with a study. And we also talked about the big gyp stack, the active gyp stack. Now, there's 2 stacks in Hillsborough County. The stack in Plant City is the old CF Industries stack. That facility closed many years ago. They were granted a closure permit in this year. That's a good thing from the FDP. So they're going through closure activities, because when you are not an active facility and processing water, your water balance increases and you can't consume the water. The Riverview facility, Commissioner Cohen also noticed that it had grown in size. It had gone through an approval to be built up. And so he and others requested a radon study to be conducted again, just to make sure residents there are safe. So I'm going to let Reggie Sanford do the formal request for the radon study.
Thank you, Ms. Doherty. Let me share my screen with you. Again, Reggie Sanford, Air Division. Okay, can everyone see?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. So today's presentation is our response to your request to seek funding for a follow-up radon study on Mosaic's gyp stack, as Ms. Doherty mentioned. As you may recall, between 2003 and 2013, EPC staff oversaw a radon study to determine if the surface dust and radiation from Mosaic stacks were negatively impacting surrounding schools and nearby residents. EPC staff measured dust levels at locations around the stack, and then we compared them to other sites that we have in the county that measured dust. And we did this to see if the surrounding community was being subjected to higher levels than what we received at our other stacks. Our monitoring results, at our other monitors, our monitoring results determined there were no notable dust impacts on the schools as a result of the gyp stacks. And as you can see from that red line, all of the results that we achieved were well below the federal standards. We then contracted with the State Bureau of Radiation Control. This is a sub-entity of the State Department of Health. We contracted with them to monitor the radioactivity from the stack. Specifically, we wanted to know if the radioactivity from radon gas and the accompanying gamma energy levels were higher at nearby schools and communities than found in the ambient environment. The Bureau did 2 study periods, and in both, the average measured school radon levels achieved were lower than the levels found at the stack and at the control site. So because there is no true outdoor standard for anyone to take action, we compared those levels that we received to the EPA indoor actionable standard. And that's 4 picocuries per liter. And you can see the data that we collected was well below that actionable indoor standard. Lastly, the Bureau conducted a radiological survey for gamma energy. And to put this in perspective, this is electromagnetic energy readings that we received. And this chart kind of shows you a relative comparison of what the levels were at the school versus common daily activities. As you can see from this comparison chart, the average gamma energy levels received by the schools on an hourly basis were roughly 20% of what one would receive if they were eating a banana, or 250 times less than what a person would receive if they had a dental x-ray. The Bureau's study concluded that there were no elevated radiation levels at any of the schools and no need for any remedial actions. We presented this information again. We presented it most recently at the September board meeting, as Ms. Doherty mentioned. And at that time, you directed staff to determine if a follow-up study was feasible in order to see if the radiation levels had changed in any way. Since that time, we contacted the Bureau's administrator, and they're on board to do their part in a follow-up study. And of course, our staff is poised to do the dust monitoring once again. At the October meeting, Ms. Doherty brought you back the cost estimate that it would take for the health department, the Bureau of Radiation Control, to do their part in the study. That was $21,000. We estimate it would cost our staff about $14,000 to do the monitoring. These costs would only be for incidental operating equipment and that sort of thing. When it came to actual labor, we would absorb, the labor that's involved in it with our current staff duties. That being said, the recommendation that we bring to you this morning is to authorize the use of $35,000 in pollution recovery fund money for EPC, Florida Department of Health, and contractors to complete the Radon Study, authorize the chair to execute any necessary agreements with the Department of Health and EPC contractors, and authorize the chair to make future non-substantive amendments to agreements, such as time extension, that sort of thing that sometimes is unpredictable. And that concludes, let's see if I can get out of here. That concludes my presentation and our formal request. Please let me know if you have any questions. I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you very much. Any questions or concerns?
Move to approve the request.
Second.
Got a motion to approve by Commissioner White, second by Commissioner Myers. And again, thank you very much. Also, thank you to Commissioner Cohen for leading us to look into this. It's important we stay on top of these monitoring in a timely way, and I think this is money well spent. So I'll ask at this time for a roll call vote.
Chair Smith?
Yes.
Kemp?
Yes.
Hagan? Commissioner Hagan? Myers?
Yes.
Cohen?
Yes.
Overman?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carried 6-0.
Thank you. Ms. Doherty, you're up with the Executive Director's report.
Thank you, Commissioner. And before I move into my remarks, I did want to thank Paula Noblett and water staff. That was a very thorough presentation. And before we move off the faucet gypsum, I do want to make a clarification for the board and members of the public. There are 11 closed stacks, and that's a good thing with as far as processed water is concerned. What happened at Piney Point was that the stack was closed, but then they allowed dredge material and heavy equipment on top to have activities that in turn ripped the liner, that in turn created a fissure, that in turn created a sinkhole that allowed this water discharge. So that's not going on at any of the other stacks, and I doubt that would ever go on again. But I think that's a good difference to point out to the public with these 11 closed stacks. Thank you. So with that, we'll go to my Executive Director remarks. They're very brief. Just a couple of slides. Mr. Brewer, thank you so much. We can move to the next slide. EPC held a virtual in-service meeting this month. Our annual Tier 1 recipients were recognized for outstanding services. You can see them there. We pick one Tier 1 winner every year, and they're one from each division. And then we did an additional 41 staff were recognized for reaching longevity milestones ranging from 5 to 35 years of service. I wish to congratulate all of our award recipients for their hard work, dedication, and well-deserved recognition. Next slide, please. Wetland staff participated in a 2-day mangrove trimming workshop this month. Attendees included over 100 professional landscapers, municipal staff, and marine contractors. This is the second year that the FDEP has requested Kim Tapley from our Wetlands Division to speak at this annual event. Melissa Yanez also assisted with a Spanish language component of the workshop. Next slide, please. Allison Amram is our Brownfields Program Coordinator, and staff attorney Andy Zadro attended the Florida and Alabama Brownfields Joint Conference held in October. This virtual conference provided insight into a variety of topics, including grant funding, Florida's proposed voluntary cleanup tax credit rule, stormwater infrastructure resiliency, connecting greenways, and climate change impacts on brownfields redevelopment. This was the first of 2 conference events. EPC will sit on the regulatory roundtable discussions to be held at the in-person event scheduled for April of next year. And for anyone who followed the new infrastructure federal bill, there was a hefty amount, I want to say it's $21 billion, put aside for more brownfields restoration in that new infrastructure bill, and that's a good thing. And next slide, please. Commissioners, just want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. Unfortunately, this year we aren't going to do our normal Thanksgiving that we have at EPC, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed that 2022 will be the year that we'll bring it back, and hopefully everybody can attend. We always have people that are currently residing policymakers, existing policymakers, alumni. It's just a great time to get together and be thankful for everything that we have. And with that, Commissioner, I'm going to go to my next slide. And before I conclude my remarks, I did want to say perhaps starting in 2022, we can bring staff to the room here and to be able to speak, so maybe that we don't have those technical difficulties. We could still have people online to answer questions, but sometimes that's what happens in a virtual world. And with that, our next meeting will be held on December 16th. Currently, we do not have any action items, so we'll be letting you know a little bit after Thanksgiving or the first week of December if we'll be canceling that meeting and just having a one consolidated meeting in January. So with that, happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Doherty. I've got a couple of commissioners in the queue probably wanting to say how much they'll be missing that Thanksgiving dinner, but let's see. Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
Thank you, and absolutely. That is one of the most fun things that we do in this time of the year, so I will be glad when we can return to that. And I actually had a discussion future item, so I'll let the rest of the commissioners.
Okay. Commissioner Kemp, you're recognized.
Yeah, my future item was the Thanksgiving and saying that it's outside, so, I mean, I'm just wondering, and I feel like there might be an obligation on the part of EPC in future years to schedule multiple ones as makeup Thanksgiving, so just a suggestion here.
I can tell you, staff would concur with you. During our in-service, we recognized the 41 members, and everybody just wanted to talk, and, or just, you miss that camaraderie, that in-person camaraderie, so maybe we'll do two.
Thank you, Commissioner White.
My comments Thanksgiving related as well, and I just want to say that if commissioner alumni are invited next year, I'll be there and I'll be hungry.
All right.
Thank you. And I do want to say thank you, Ms. Doherty, for your very succinct but important presentation, reminding us, as always, how much our EPC staff is doing behind the scenes and participating and spreading out knowledge to other conferences and working with everyone throughout the region on improving ways we can protect our environment. I just am really grateful and proud of our EPC staff, and thank you for that little glimpse into how much they do for us.
Thank you, Commissioner. And, I would be remiss if I didn't mention our philanthropic committee. We've started our Elves for Elders. We give toys to Redlands Migrant. We do Feeding Tampa Bay. And I would just say to members of the public, this is a time when a lot of people are in need. So, Thanksgiving is a time to be thankful, but also to give to those less fortunate.
Thank you. And with that, Commissioner Overman has a future item?
Yes, thank you very much. In the news we are seeing a very high spike of manatee deaths. They were taken off the endangered lists recently, or not too long ago. It seemed like forever ago, and it may have been a while. But my question is, given that we have, as a county, put forth a fertilizer protective measure to protect from algae blooms associated with fertilizer releases during the rainy season. And we have historically heard that you're monitoring the seagrasses and seeing that we're seeing a decline in seagrass availability. My question is there a way to partner with Florida Wildlife and the other organizations that actually do protect the manatee or provide recommendations for protecting the manatee? Can we get a report back to determine maybe what the greatest causes are of the deaths that we're seeing? We've seen, I think, 1,000 that have died this year,
in Florida,
which is significant. And given their dependence on seagrasses, it would, based on the things that we've done to try and protect seagrasses, can we get a report back on efforts that we may need to consider on the impact of seagrasses and the lives of manatee, but more importantly, find a way to partner with those entities that are developing a strategy for protecting them, or maybe consider putting them back on the endangered list or supporting that effort. So it doesn't need to be immediately, obviously. We're not meeting in December. But I would like to take a look at that circumstance and see if there's a way that our local EPC can assist in that danger to our most precious manatee.
Commissioner, we serve on a lot of different boards, the estuary program included, so we do interface with FWC, and we'll be happy to bring that presentation back. Obviously, yes, seagrasses are one issue, but also boating incidents are up for the deaths of manatees. So I don't know if that includes, no wake zones or whatever. And also, the bay has increased in temperature. And so we will be bringing back a presentation in 2022 that will look at, we gave you the presentation of seagrasses, 6,000 acres out of 42,000 acres that we lost from 2018 to 2020. Mapping will start occurring in 2022, which will look at 2020 to 2022. So, but we will get with FWC, it is not our jurisdiction, but obviously I think a lot of people are pushing for them to be put back on the endangered species list.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner White, you're recognized.
Thank you. And I think what I heard Commissioner Overman say is that a possible outcome could be that this board sends in a letter of support, for that redesignation. So if our staff finds that that's appropriate, I would sure support it. And I currently sit on the Estuary Program Board. We have a reorganization meeting today, but whether it's me or whichever commissioner ends up on it, I'm sure that, there would be some support over there as well to send in, a similar letter. So
Yes, Commissioner, that was similar to the letter for the designation of the Little Manatee River. So letters of support are always very important, but we'll get you the most recent science from FWC, and maybe they'll deliver it or we'll deliver it to you, and then in January put forth a letter to the appropriate entity, if that's the wish of the board.
Thank you very much. And seeing no other comments or future items from anyone, I wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving, and hope you all have a wonderful time with your families or however you celebrate, and adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.